So, Ollie, it's been really exciting to have you on. I've followed you for a long time. And not only that, I always think that you can judge a person's character by what people say behind the back. And I've become, relatively good friends, although I've never met him, with Paul Standall over the course of last year. He's my first guest on my podcast. He's currently coaching my partner. And he said so many good things about you just in DMs, which says a lot about your character. So I think you have an interesting story, and I think it will help a lot of people. But for people that don't know who you are and what your backstory is, tell us a little bit about who Ollie Carson is.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, dude. Thank you for the lovely intro, and I'll send Paul the $5 straight after this. So thank you very much. So my backstory, I guess my backstory is it relates to our space, the fitness industry, etc. I kind of got into fitness in the military. So one of my sub roles in the military was a physical training instructor. And that's kind of really where I found my passion for coaching and for health and fitness and training and so on. And then to give you like the really shortened down version, I'm sure we'll probably dig into each of these in a bit more detail, well, potentially. I then left the military and joined Jamie Alderton's flagship gym, or his gym, Grenade Fit, on the south coast of the UK, Grenade Fit. That was great. Spent a couple of years there, built up my own client base, opened my own facility, started online coaching, did really well there, built a bit of a reputation. I'm giving you the really sped up synopsis here. And then when actually the lockdown hit, I just got a lot of interest from other personal trainers and would-be online coaches as to how to, set up their own online platform so they could pivot, during the lockdowns, etc. And that's really where Supercharge was born, which is kind of which brings us kind of to where we are now.
What do you think? Like, before going into your backstory, because there's like business coach of a dime a dozen these days. Like I get so many in my DMs, even people. I don't know if you've got this one, the one that. Have you ever considered dating a client? It's like, that is the worst sales intro I have ever heard in my life.
I've never had that one, but it sounds good.
I'll tell you off air who it is, and I don't think you'll be surprised.
Okay, right.
What sets like Supercharge apart from everybody else?
I think a couple of things set us apart, but I had a similar question recently from a lovely chap called Jens, who's the co-founder of the PFCA, which is like I guess an independent body that helps personal trainers deliver better training to their clients and so on. Similar sort of question. And he's like, what makes you different from other mentors and all of that kind of thing? And honestly, not much would be my kind of really authentic answer. I think the reason that people work with me, and the reason that people work with anyone who provides a service for that matter, is just rapport and connection. Like you say, you can't move for business coaches at the minute. Yes, a lot of your decision will be influenced by, who maybe you follow for the longest time, and you've built up that element of know, like, and trust. Maybe some coaches have better social proof, so they're getting better results with their clients. But 9 times out of 10, when I speak to clients who come on board with me and I ask why did they choose me, it's just because they felt like they had a connection with me, or our values were aligned, or whatever it might be. In terms of what potentially sets us apart from other business coaches or other business mentorships is, I would say, this is going to sound really cheesy, but my values are very, set in stone, and I won't deviate from them at the expense of getting our clients more business or whatever. So we try and do things as quote unquote ethically as we possibly can. We have our clients' best interests at heart, and that's at the center of what we do. And I try and do as much of the work for the clients as I possibly can. So like done for you program launches and things of that nature, which is slightly unique in this industry. But other than that, honestly, Simon, dude, it's very similar to a lot of mentorships, I would imagine.
That's a super honest answer. And like I've worked with mentors, and I've seen a lot of mentors do things in the past. And I think there's an element of the values coming out, is a big thing, because I think there's an element of one-to-one personal approach to your mentorship, which is lost in a lot of the bigger mentorships, where you often get a big mastermind once a month, and then you kind of had to fend for yourself. And a lot of PTs, I always find, are they're great coaches but bad business people, and you've skipped about 3-4 steps ahead when you go into sort of that model. Like, I've got information, but I have no idea how to apply it.
I'm so glad that you said that, mate. For me, great mentorship is, I mean, information is information. You can't move for information at the minute. You can find it absolutely everywhere, but great mentorship is implementation and application. So actually having that personal touch and feel with a client is really important for me, because I know if I really want somebody to action something, it needs to come from me. And if your clients are paying attention, then they will implement. But the second they feel like you're not paying attention because you've automated this, or you've got another coach doing it, or whatever it might be, they kind of switch off a little bit. And that's just what I've noticed in the past, actually having tried to move over to that larger group model. I'll be, again, completely honest, we do have a large group element. So typically when I work with a new coach, the initial, and you'll know this, Simon, because we've had a conversation as well, but the initial phase of the mentorship or the coaching process is very one-to-one and hands-on with myself. And then they gradually get phased into the group model, which makes it infinitely more scalable for me, so that I can help more people.
Yeah, I think that's important though as well. As you said, most people signed up for you because they have resonated with you, and how much do you pull away from your values when people sign up for you and then get given somebody else?
Yes, unless you're very honest about that on the front end, and you go into that conversation, that initial touch point, and say, look, I can help you and I can help you achieve X, Y, and Z, but just so we're clear, you're not going to be speaking to me much. And that's fine if you do have that conversation, but I think most of them don't. And I say most of them, I'm obviously referring to other business coaches and mentors.
So going into a little bit of your background, I always think the military thing's a really interesting take, because everyone takes something very different from being in the military, from the people I know that I've spoken to. And I think there's misconceptions on both sides of what the military is. I think some people think it is literally this very regimented, out hustle, hardest work in the room, which you've obviously proven you can work very, very hard. And then I know from when I was a kid, the kids that went into the military were often the kids that weren't very good at school and struggled. I don't imagine that being you either. So with the military, was that something you always wanted to go into? Like, what was the motivation behind going into the military?
So yeah, I mean, you pulled out a really interesting point there. We'll come back to that, about the perception of military guys and girls and what it actually is. But for me, I mean, I'm not like one of these guys who, military runs in their family bloodline, and all of their, their fathers and their grandfathers and their great grandfathers served in a certain regiment. It just wasn't me. I just had no connection to the military whatsoever. And it was more born out of a necessity, really, in that, I was born and bred in a pretty rough part of northwest London. I didn't have lots of opportunity. I was an apprentice mechanic, and I just got to a point in my life, a bit of a crossroads, where I thought, well, what do I do here? Because I'm not really making anything of myself. And I just decided to go into the careers office and see what it was all about. And the careers officers are great. They're salespeople themselves, and they sell you the dream of traveling and camaraderie and brotherhood and all these great, exciting things. And I just lapped it all up. And to be honest with you, it was exactly what it said on the tin. It was a great chance to meet new people, to separate myself from what had been a bit of a broken home previously and a rough upbringing. So the military really did shape my adult life, and I'm forever grateful for the opportunity and the lessons that it gave me, for sure.
Did you mentioned traveling? Like, did you tour or not?
Yeah, I did a tour of Afghanistan for 8 months. So yeah, that was a highlight of my career, for sure.
It's interesting you use the word highlight in that, because that's something that would terrify the majority of people, including me. Like, what was your thoughts at the time when you got the message, however that's developed, of that, like, you're going to go to Afghanistan?
Oh man, it's like, well, I waited a very long time to go. So I probably served 6 years before getting the operational tour to Afghan. And look, when you sign up, you are indoctrinated to some degree. You are kind of built up to prepare to go on operations. It's essentially what you train for. And so there is an element of wanting to go and wanting to earn that, I guess, badge of honor amongst your peers. Because up until the point that you haven't been on tour, you're almost a little bit disregarded, which is understandable. You've got these guys around you who are veterans. They've been on several tours. They've experienced combat. And if you haven't experienced that for yourself, then you could be a great soldier, but a lot of your input isn't necessarily respected as much as it could be. So for me, I really wanted to go on tour, and a lot of the guys really do want to go on tour. So getting the call up to go was amazing for me. I understand from the outside point of view, it might seem like a really daunting prospect, but actually it's part of the reason that you serve, or at least it should be.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of those things, and this is, I've always had that question, like would I ever have joined the military if my time was different, or have my time again? And in a way, I don't think I would, but I admire so many of the lessons that you can learn. We'll cover some of those things when how the transition to business happened. But I always looked at it as like, if I got the call, would I be willing to die for my country? And as you said, like, you're training for that. You have to be ready. And I don't, then I wholeheartedly hold my hand up, because I don't think I would be. And I think it's an incredibly brave thing to do, whether it's indoctrinated through training or not. It's a mentality that not everyone else has. Like, what was the experience like? Scary, exciting, exhilarating, all the above?
All of the above. It's just something that is uncomparable to anything else. It really, really is. And on your point of, dying for your country, very few of the guys and girls that I served with, including myself, were, immensely patriotic people who were doing this for a higher cause, and incredibly selfless people who wanted to protect their country. It's not often the case. We're very selfish people. The military offers you a really interesting and exciting lifestyle. You live on low cost because you're put up in low cost accommodation. You're fed. You've got a roof over your head. You can earn bonuses when you're on tour. All of these things, and so it's a selfish endeavor, especially if you've got family and loved ones that have to, unfortunately follow you along and wait for you while you're away for several months of the year. So it's not really a patriotic thing. And some people do it because they love Queen and country, and that's absolutely fine as well. But in terms of the experience itself, honestly, dude, it's pinch yourself moments, stepping off the back of a Chinook helicopter at sort of 3 a.m, to go and stack up against the compound, because that's been a Taliban bed down location, and you're grabbing intelligence on the enemy picture. It's like these things that you're in the moment, and you smell it and you can feel it, and the heat and everything, and it's just an overwhelming feeling of, excuse my French, how the fuck did I get here? It is incredible. Yeah,
I don't think you can do that without swearing, but feel free.
It is cool. It's very, very cool. It did have its moments for sure.
Is there a, obviously with whatever you're allowed or willing, up for saying, is there a story that springs to mind when you think back of your tours?
Oh, so many stories. What kind of stories would you like?
Oh, that's an interesting thing. Well, I mean, like, let's start with something that shows the experience, and then maybe we'll go on to more light-hearted ones as we tail off.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so to give you just like some overall context, I serve with a unit called the Brigade Reconnaissance Force, which is essentially brought together when the brigade is deploying on operations. So they take several units from the brigade. So the brigade is like really big picture. They take several units, and then from those several units, they pick several guys to make up the Brigade Reconnaissance Force. And our sole duty when we're on tour is to gather intelligence on the enemy, build up the battle plan for the brigade, and carry out specific operations on, known enemy locations and so on and so forth. So it's a really, really cool job, and I was very fortunate to get that job. And I experienced death in several scenarios whilst on tour. Death of the enemy, death of comrades, death in friendly fire, death in accidents on camp when back in Bastion. And it doesn't matter how, for me at least, it didn't matter how frequently or how graphic death was for me whilst in Afghanistan. It didn't impact me psychologically in any way at all. But it wasn't until I came home, and actually I had a bit of a traumatic experience when, long story short, I found my neighbor having killed himself He took his own life with a shotgun, and I found him in that way. But because I wasn't primed, and you almost on operational tour, you're almost coiled up. You're like a coiled up spring. You're prepped and you're ready for something to go wrong or for something to kick off. And so it's almost like bracing for impact. You're prepared for it. And so death, knowing that it could happen at any moment, isn't really surprising, as weird as that sounds. When I came home and I found my neighbor after having killed himself, and not being prepared to walk in the room and find him the way that I did, it completely broke me, and it brought everything back. And I suffered quite severely with PTSD for a year or 2 years, contributed to breakdown of relationships and friendships, had to have cognitive behavioral therapy and all of these different things. But it's really fascinating for me because, I experienced so much death in Afghan, and then just one experience back home, and it was just a completely different wave of emotions.
I suppose it's almost like a pattern break, right? Like we always talk about, if you ever listen to dating coaches, right? That you go in, you do something different and breaks pattern. And I can imagine this being very much the same. Like the pattern is death in a war zone, but the pattern at home isn't. And you're totally knocked back. And it's almost that shock that hits you to your core, I suppose, more than the actual act itself, as horrible as it is in any circumstance.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's crazy. Very, very crazy. So that was a massive life lesson for me. And now part of the reason that I'm very, very passionate about helping guys with PTSD and doing what I can in terms of charitable work and things of that nature. So it's just a bit of a topic close to my heart.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is it something, I suppose you said you didn't feel it when you were out there, but is it something that you ever get used to? Being in the military, being in a war zone, you've seen, as you said, you've seen death on other sides. You've seen people kill people. I'm not going to ask, but you might have been at the hand of it yourself in a war zone. That's not against the realms of possibility. Is it something you ever get used to?
I think it's very different for everybody. I think chemically and physiologically, we're all made up very differently, aren't we? And we can relate that back to coaching quite easily. You can take, clients who are in very, very similar situations, provide them very similar plans or strategy, and they'll all respond differently because of their previous experiences, their social environment, whatever it might be, just a number of things. So I think it affects people differently. And that's often part of the problem for individuals in that scenario is they can look at their mate to the left of them who's been through very similar experiences and is just cracking on and is absolutely fine, and then have almost a feeling of guilt or feeling of being inferior because why am I feeling this way if he's fine? So it's understanding that we are all individuals and we all handle things differently.
Yeah, I always think that's an interesting thing. Is like we're all very, very different. We're all very much the same. So if you look at the chemical process of how stress works, adrenaline, noradrenaline, all this stuff, cortisol will go up, regardless whether it's a work deadline or something explodes in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The experience is incredibly different. The physiological response is the same. And I was thinking, what floors me might totally be fine for you. There are things that you have gone through that I would 100% not be able to cope with. But you might find something so tame might be the opposite. And I'm very much a firm believer of never judging anyone's stress by my standards. That thing of there's always someone worse off. There's people who are out food in Africa. Well, yes, but I have no realms of comprehension of that. Exactly. And for this guy that you walked in on, was this someone that was also in the military? Was this someone that suffered from PTSD, or was this just totally random?
It's completely random. So I used to live on a farm. This is post-military. So I was a personal trainer at this point, had my own gym, and lived on this farm. And there were 4 houses on this farm. And just by pure chance, he was the owner of a large gym in our local area in Rustington called Lanes. And I coached online his secretary, just by pure chance. So I was an online coach for his secretary. And she knew that I lived next door to Chris, his name was. And she messaged me one day and said, Ollie, can you go around and check on Chris? I know you live next door to him, but we haven't seen him for a few days and it's, out of character. And I instantly, my spidey senses started tingling, and I get this kind of weird feeling for things. And I was actually looking after my son Jude at the time, and he was really small in his cot. So I called my then partner back from PT sessions. I said, look, you need to come home. Something's not right. I've got a funny feeling here. Can you come home and look after Jude? She did. I went around, went into the house, and door was ajar. And yeah, found him on his bed with a shotgun on his chest and his, sorry to be graphic, but his head all over the wall. You know, it was a very traumatic experience. And I think at the time I dealt with it the way that I should have, you know, called all the emergency services, make sure nobody went in, all that kind of stuff, ticked all the boxes. And as the days went on, I couldn't relax. I couldn't get control of my thoughts. I kept having flashbacks. I was anxious. I was irritable. I was angry. And it really was the kind of downward spiral then of my mental health for that, for a good year. But CBT did a really good job, and some hypnotherapy as well, to help me kind of overcome some of those thoughts that I had.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously not to the same extent, but I can to a degree relate with it. I remember when I went to Stratford, London Stratford, to pick up a pair of glasses. I remember witnessing a hit and run, like a high speed hit and run. And I was just walking this like zebra crossing, and like all of a sudden the lights were on, everyone started to moving, and you just hear this car zooming past. I know it was stolen or whatever, but it was going way beyond that speed. If you know Stratford Shopping Centre, into the old bit of Stratford Shopping Centre, that's a place where cars don't drive quick. No. And I just saw almost in slow motion this woman go forward, back, deciding whether to go, decide to just try and outrun it. And he didn't even slow down to hit her. He ran through her, up in the air, rolled to my feet. And I don't know what happened to her. I same thing. I was the person who called the ambulance. I cleared people away. She could have broken her neck, whatever. I don't know. So I didn't do anything else. I just made sure she was still with us until the ambulance there. And I was the same thing. Like you know how to act in the moment. And I remember getting back and having like lunch with my now fiance, and I just sat and I just couldn't speak. And the next few days I was checking Twitter like mad of like, I need to find out what's happened to this woman. Yeah. And to this day, I hope the fact that I never managed to find anything, there wasn't a news story, suggests that it wasn't as bad as I was fearing. But I can totally feel that, where you, in the moment, and then you stop and you think, and your nervous system calms down. And it's like, did that actually happen?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? The human body, what it can do in those moments. It's all chemical reactions, isn't it? It's crazy. You know, Afghan for me was a tremendous place for giving me perspective on situations that I now deem to be either, you know, I compartmentalize, and this is difficult, this is not difficult, whatever. But that's all my perspective. That's my perception on a situation based on my previous life experiences. And I wouldn't have that relative perception if it wasn't for going to Afghan and seeing those awful things, or finding Chris, or whatever it might be. So as bad as some of these situations may seem on face value, they serve me incredibly well in life, in business. When I have challenges, I've got perspective. So I always use that for context.
That spidey sense you talked about, and is that something that you still have? Do you still like look around, like military training, like I'm looking at doors, I'm looking at exits, I know when something's amiss? Is that something that stayed with you, or was it something that
we call it 5s and 20s in the military? So 5s and 20s, whenever you take a knee, or you're stopping the patrol for a moment, you check your 5-meter radius and you check your 20-meter radius. And it was an Afghanism to look for IEDs or signs of ground sign that had been disturbed, where the Taliban had been planting IEDs. But it's more about the thinking of, okay, I could be in a vulnerable position here. I'm going to check my surroundings and make sure. And my partner now, Katie, she notices it all the time. She'll see me looking around or doing something, and she'll go, "What are you doing?" And I do still do it. I still kind of have my guard up, and I'm incredibly observant. Like, I'll see something and I'll remember it and go, "That was weird." And then I'll say it to Katie, and then something will happen regarding that thing. It happened recently with a car and a number plate, and I remembered the number plate, and I said to Katie, something weird going on there. And sure enough, you know, I do it all the time. I'm incredibly observant with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
the risk of going off on a big tangent, but I think it's something incredibly close to my heart, and I think it's something that probably is to you as well after that what you experienced. We're seeing an age now where men, in particular, men our age, which is totally scary, have more issues with their mental health and suicide than before. It's the biggest killer in men our age, which is it's mind blowing. Why do you think that there are more issues now with men's mental health, and what can we do about it? Not us specifically, but it's a greater.
Not an expert on the matter at all, and I wouldn't pretend for 1 second to have any sort of credible advice as to how we can stop it. But I completely agree, and I recognize that it is hugely, hugely important for us to be speaking about this right now, and I'm incredibly invested in it as somebody who's been suicidal themselves, somebody who has been prescribed sertraline to help with depression and things of that nature. I think it's a combination of things. Personally, I think we're probably more consciously aware of it now because there is a open dialogue, and so it's maybe at the forefront of our thinking a little bit more. Men are openly speaking about their problems more, which is actually a good thing. I think men have notoriously always struggled with their mental health and a feeling of having to provide, having to meet a certain amount of standards, whether that's physically or in a relationship or in their careers or whatever it might be. I think men are under a lot of pressure. But I think because it is an open dialogue in society now, we are just more consciously aware of the fact that men are really struggling. How do we stop it, or how do we reduce it? I think we're on the right trajectory in that we are speaking about it more. There are more and more charities. I mean, look, when I went through PTSD, there was a great charity, Icarus, who provided me with free therapy for as long as I needed it. All the support, follow-ups, checks. I mean, that's incredible. People are funding that with their own money. So we are on the right trajectory, in my opinion. I could go and say all the normal things. It's social media, it's comparison. I think male suicide has been prevalent for many, many years, even prior to social media. I think the whole situation is perhaps exacerbated and at the forefront of our thinking because we're speaking about it, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. So is it that there is more issues with men's mental health, or is it the fact that now we're more aware of the issues of men's mental health? And I think social media, I think it's a bit of a cop-out to say that social media is the issue, because I think social media if used right, brings people together as much as it potentially pulls people apart and makes people feel lonely. Yes, we do have comparisons and imposter syndrome, but I know from lockdown here and in a country away from all my friends and family, we started this podcast me talking about our common friend Paul Standall, not met the guy, and that only happened from doing this show, just reaching out on social media. I thought I made an effort I'm going to connect with people. When everyone's working on Zoom, I was like, well, it doesn't matter if I message someone that's 10 minutes down the road or whether I message someone in London. We're all the same distance apart when it's on Zoom. But on the flip side of that, I do see things potentially harder now in a world where the more divided opinion is the thing that's pushed on social media. And I think there's a big rationale of overcorrection. So now with things like Black Lives Matter and a lot of feminism based, I'm not want to call it anything. These are all big, important things. But when we should be fighting for equality, we're often having this overcorrection, which then generally in history, white male Westerners have been the people that have been the most privileged through life. And now in the first time probably in history, this overcorrection has made it harder than ever before.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think back to your point of social media and, not pinning the blame solely on social media is massive because, ultimately, yes, it is at our fingertips and we can quite easily make comparisons and that might be harmful for our mental health. But I think it really boils down to, I think it potentially brings something out that's already in you. If you are somebody who is innately jealous or innately insecure, then perhaps social media and spending many, many hours flicking through jacked guys on Instagram isn't going to be a good option for you. But in the same way, if you're somebody who is very aspirational, outgoing, and likes to connect with people, then social media can be an incredible platform for you. So I think it maybe brings out the best and worst in us, depending on what character traits we already have. So yeah, pinning the blame, I think I'm never one to complain about social media. It's afforded me a life that I live now. Yeah, business. And, you know, I just never complain. You can't take the rough and, you can't take the good and not take the bad. So yeah, I never complain about it.
Yeah. Tying up the life in the military thing, like, what do you feel the lessons, because you see this all the time, especially in media portrayed people coming out of the military, right? There was a lot of commonality and very, very good, high integrity, high work ethic, very structured, very organized. What are some of the lessons that you took from your time in the military that have helped you in other aspects of life, whether it's the generic stuff that I spoke about a second ago, or things completely outside the box that you realized?
Apart from, as I've already mentioned, that perspective and that context that I can always like refer back to, like if this is my datum point for difficult, I mean, I've done some incredibly difficult things in the military. You ask any military guy who's done like some recce work, you ask them about subsurface OPs for 5 days, and you'll see them physically shiver. So it gives me great context, and I often lean on that. You know, if I'm going through challenging times in business or life or whatever, I lean on that perspective. But aside from that, unfortunately, it is all of the common things that you've probably heard before of, you know, work ethic, the importance of cohesion in a team environment, integrity, you know. So we have core values in the military. The core values are courage, discipline, respect for others, integrity, loyalty, and selfless commitment. And if you abide by those core values, you're a pretty good human. I don't think that anybody is innately born and a great human. You have to consciously try and be a good person, you know, because our own selfish needs and wants and desires could lead us to do in society not good things. But if you live by a set of values, and what the military does is it gives you the core values, or it tries to instill the core values into you. If you do genuinely live by them, you can't go too far wrong. You know, when you're making decisions, courage, discipline, respect for others, integrity, loyalty, selfless commitment, those are great values to live by. And that's probably the best thing that I've taken from the military.
Tell me a little bit about that camaraderie. Like, that's something that is you get, look from the outside looking in, there is a difference between a military friend and a friend on the outside. Like, there's a whole new level to it. And we said we'd end with a couple of more lighthearted stories about the military on the chapter of this. But tell me a little bit about what camaraderie is like on the inside of the military, and tell me some of the couple of the most entertaining stories you can think of from your time there.
It is the most, so the camaraderie is built on the foundation of you're all going through the shit together, and the humor that comes out of that. I mean, some of the scenarios that you find yourself in, you just simply have to look at the bloke to the left and to the right of you and laugh, because if you don't laugh, you genuinely will cry. And the humor is incredibly dark in the military. I won't repeat any of the jokes that we've shared time because it's just not appropriate at all. But the humor is incredibly dark, but it gets you through challenging times. You know, when you're piss wrapped through, you're soaking wet, you're cold, you're on a patrol, you're tired, you're carrying, 50 kilos worth of kit across your body, and you've got to run and fight a makeshift enemy. You don't want to do it, but the camaraderie is the guy to the left of you, the guy to the right of you is doing it, and you're not going to let your outpost down. You don't want to be the weak link. It's the camaraderie is also very much driven by this testosterone-filled, egotistical male environment. You don't want to be, or you shouldn't want to be, the weak link in your section or your platoon or troop or whatever. And so that helps people elevate their levels just by what everyone else around them is doing. It's very driven by egotistical traits. But yeah, the camaraderie is, like you say, you cannot match it anywhere else. And that's actually a really big transition, a difficult transition that I had to make, is moving into civilian life and working with quote unquote civilians. That sounds awful, but working with people who aren't military folk. You can't act and behave around civilians the way that you do military blokes. And so that's a big adjustment to make. I spent 9 years in the military, so that was a huge adjustment to make for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting being around the humor element of it, especially now where we see on the couple of days ago, Dave Chappelle getting tackled on the stage and people getting cancelled left, right, and centre, and Chris Rock getting slapped. Like we're in a world now where that humor is now frowned upon. And it's interesting to see in when we look at times where it is like you go through the hardest times, how it really is important to have a sense of humor.
It's honestly one of the key ingredients to a military force being successful. It's referred to as morale. You know, in the army, it's morale. And if the morale of the blokes is down because they're going through a shit time, they're being worked hard, they're sleep deprived or whatever it might be. When morale is low, they don't operate at the level that they need to operate to achieve the outcome. And so humor really does an incredible job, almost like physical energy. When morale is lifted, when you're looking at each other and you're laughing at how shit the situation is and you're cracking out horrendous jokes that you couldn't say in a room of anyone else, it just brings morale up, and almost like getting physical energy, you're able to crack on. So morale is so important, it cannot be understated.
So transitioning slightly into the business stuff, but we talked about it teaching you work ethic. So talk to me a little bit about your view on luck. Is it legitimate, or is it often people make an excuse for people that are more successful than them?
Yeah, luck definitely plays a role in people's success. But again, the old cheesy saying of luck is opportunity meeting preparation. So, you know, some people might have been lucky had they taken risks, had they been prepared, had they done the prerequisite work required to take on the opportunity. So luck in isolation, I don't feel, is enough of an asset to see people through. You still need to take risk. You still need to work hard. You still need to be consistent. You know, all these hustle porn words that we have rammed down our throats, they're unfortunately incredibly true. You know,
it's your balance between working hard and working smart.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's the difference between being okay and being okay. You know, like when you, I mean, I've only recently in the last perhaps 2 years or so learned a lot about working smart. And I owe that a lot to some of my own mentors and guides. Working smart really is like the next level of Super Saiyan. You know, it completely changes the game. And you have to almost detach yourself potentially from some of the, not the values, because like I said previously, I never detach myself from my values, but you have to detach yourself certainly from some of your belief systems around what's right and what's wrong in business, in providing a service, etc. The biggest one for coaches is thinking that they are the product. The outcome is the product. So when somebody invests in you, when somebody invests in your coaching or your program or whatever it might be, they only care about themselves. They don't give a shit about you, and they care about the outcome. If you have a way of guaranteeing an outcome for a client, irrespective of what your process is, then that's worth a lot of money to somebody, and they get to decide the value of that. And that's been the biggest belief system that I had to break down in my own mind and my own way of thinking to help me to work smarter, not harder.
You mentioned earlier on, and this ties into this in terms of working smarter. You mentioned earlier on about what sets Supercharged apart. And you talked about a little bit about doing a lot of the work for your guys and creating templates and things like this. What, with coaches, what's your view on templating stuff as opposed to completely unique individual, you know, N=1 style coaching? Because I have a very strong view on this, but I want to hear yours first before I tell you mine.
Okay, so my views are that when it comes to programming, you have to meet the client where they're at, of course. However, if you genuinely believe that this client here, and for anybody who isn't watching, I'm putting one finger up on one side, And this client here, I'm putting another finger up on another side. If you genuinely believe that they are so exponentially different that they couldn't possibly have a skeleton program with small adjustments made based on limitations, preference, equipment availability, and so on. If you don't think that that would work, then you are, in my mind, you're stuck. If you're making a brand new program from scratch for every single client, you're working hard, not smart. So I think the solution really is skeleton programs and then meeting the client where they're at and making adjustments based on limitations, preference, and equipment availability, lifestyle, etc. What's your thinking, Simon? Because you're a smarter dude than me when it comes to training and nutrition. So.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, like I couldn't agree with you more in terms of what you said there. And I'll also one up it in the sense of, I think having templates and skeleton programs and trying to make something that is for the 80, 90% of the people you work with, not only allows you to work smart, but it allows you to give a better quality of service. Because as you mentioned earlier on, in terms of the person's not the product, the outcome is the product. But often what I think a lot of coaches struggle with is your meal plans, your training programs, they're not the product either. Like someone going on a sales call, you get this, you get this, you get this, and they don't care. What is that personal connection, like people signing up to you? They like you, so they want to sign up to you. So I could take your intake form and I can go, right, I'm going to start with a blank page. I'm going to make a meal plan and a training program. In that time that I'm making that, one, it's going to take longer to do, and you might not hear from me for 3-4 days. Two, if I've had 6 clients, 20 online check-ins, I'm not going to write a program based off 11 years worth of experience and, working with people around the world. I'm going to write something quickly when I'm tired and forget stuff. So I would much rather have a relatively automated meal plan that's based off the calories, based off your weight, a program template that's I go, right, I've got these templates, this is the most relevant one for you, and adjust it, get you started, and then literally speak to you and go, right, I've now got time. Where do you need help? Is there anything you don't like in this meal plan? I want a cookie. Okay, I can put a cookie in. One of the big things I've gained is, it takes my time, but it's very worth doing, is adding in an initial strategy call with every single client. So I go, if you don't like anything I've given you, let's adjust it on here now so you can just go and execute. And I think that's been, I've had such a better response. I've had such better results because of the systems I've had, it's allowed me to make better connections with the people I work with and truly personalize it, because I'm personalizing it to them as they go and as they evolve, rather than having a macro calculator they can find on Google to make the perfect starting plan, which is a guess anyway.
Yes, 100%. Totally agree. I'm glad that you're on board with that, dude. Glad you're on board. But that's a big problem that coaches face, is the belief system that everything needs to be completely individually tailored to every client. And what you're basically trying to do, I mean, by the time you signed up 100 clients, surely that 100th client, you're reinventing the wheel, or at least you're trying to. And actually, if you know, like this program here, this person can train 3 days per week. I'm going to put them on an upper lower full body split, for example, and pretty, decent exercise across the board, good exercise selection, good exercise order, good amount of total volume for a female, whatever it might be. And then you just make those little, adjustments based on what doesn't work for that individual, what kit they don't have or do have. You're just going to find things so much more efficient, and your clients are still going to get incredible results. It's not cookie cutter. You're not just sending out the same plan to everyone, but you've got to work effectively. So that's a big belief system that coaches need to break down.
I think it's also worse for people who are actually results driven in a way. The people that aren't lazy, it's actually worse for, because I've actually got a document. My client says you might come around and hate me, but I'll explain why this is a good thing. I literally have a script. Like, if a client follows everything based on what I would expect to happen with the majority, I have pre-written check-ins that I go and adjust. And the reason I do this, it means whether you're my first check-in of the day or my 30th check-in of the day, you will get the same quality of response. The only thing that I'm in control of energy-wise is the Loom video that I record. I've got ADHD and I'm loud and I'm energetic. That's not a problem. Yep. So if I go through that system, I've got to check it. What that allows me to do is, there's things that through my years of experience, I know there's a good thing to put in there. Like throwing in a diet pit stop and a free meal to keep them mentally engaged, throwing in X supplement at certain stages that I found benefited most people, like something like your himbean or CBD oil when they get stressed or whatever else. And that's something I found works, like the little finishing fine-tuned touch that makes the diet easier, better, whatever. I don't think about that when I look at the data and go, they've not dropped 1%, I'm going to do this to food. Like I look at the micro, I can't look at the bigger picture when I'm in the business. If I can, when I'm outside and trying to work on the business, create a product and an environment that works, and then I go in and go, is this relevant to where the client is actually at 8 weeks? I go, no, I need to change that, and that. But I'm not changing the entire email because some of the stuff will read the same.
Yeah, 100%. That's such a good way of doing it. And actually, really interestingly, and almost like we're on some sort of sync here, the next training that we're delivering to the coaches is called the Supercharged Check-in Flow. And we're showing the coaches step by step how to set up and prepare for and then deliver a world-class check-in to their clients that gets them motivated, inspired, gets them all the relevant changes they need, and leaves them with a really clear plan to progress forward. So I think these are things that you don't get taught as a personal trainer. You know, when you finish your course, it's like, right, go into the big bad world. Most coaches will be delivering some form of online support to their clients, whether they're an in-person PT or a full online coach. And they know that they need to check in with clients, but they don't even know what they're delivering. Like they're just blagging it. And that's what we try and do at Supercharged is take the guesswork out and give them process that they can follow so that they can repeatedly get good results with their clients.
Yeah, exactly. It's replicable, right? And like, if you, I know people that kind of don't know set goals, so you make adjustments, but are they even on track? And I think to a degree, a lot of things that I've worked on systemized, I've systemized a lot based on the fact that I have ADHD and I've had to work around the shortcomings. Like people are more organized. I found them be really efficient at really inefficient methods. There's a guy I know, shout out here to a guy I used to work with called James Chester, phenomenal personal trainer, but everything was done over WhatsApp. And because he was so like neurotypical brain compared to me, he was very organized. He always remembered to reply to messages and he'd bang, get food pics every day. And in a way, it looks more simple, but I'm like, there's going to be a point where it hits a ceiling where that doesn't work. And for me, that'd be chaos. So I've had to think of other ways. And this works for me at the moment, and I'm always refining and I'm always picking holes at stuff. But I think this is the reason why I have a different take on imposter syndrome too, because I think imposter syndrome often is a good thing. Because if it wasn't for that, I'd never improve my product. I'd be like, cool, done.
Yeah, imposter syndrome for me is it's the feeling created when you are pushing yourself. You know, if you're not feeling a sense of imposter syndrome, then my challenge to you would be, are you coasting? You know, I feel like an imposter every single day, but I don't relate my sense of character or self-worth to my feeling of myself. And in fact, I relate it to, you know, my relationships, the results my clients are getting. So when I look at those things subjectively, clients are crushing it, relationships are good. Whether or not I feel like an imposter or not, it's irrelevant. It's like, it's make-believe. You know, my clients are doing well. So whether you feel like you're cut out to be doing the job or you're blagging it or whatever, look at the hard facts. You know, if you're a PT or an online coach and your client wants to lose weight and they're losing weight, you're not an imposter. You're smashing it, dude. Keep going, you know?
Yeah.
So when you can detach yourself from your thoughts and feelings and just look at things subjectively, that will definitely help you stop worrying about imposter syndrome.
I think as well with certainly with coaching the general population, so civilians, shall we say, that like when you coach them, there's such an emotional connection to food, especially in the online realm where people will just, if they're overwhelmed, they just stop replying to WhatsApp messages. There's always going to be a few clients in your roster that aren't getting the results that some other people are. But you can look at that as like, I'm an imposter, I'm not good at this. Or you can go, right, what do I need to improve in my system that if 5 of these people are dropping off, how can I make that 2 of these people? Mm-hmm. And I can convert 3 back into the fold. And if all of your clients were nailing it all the time, then 1, you're probably not having enough clients, or 2, you're never going to improve. You'll get complacent.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I agree, mate. I think too many coaches now get into business with almost like a sense of entitlement that their clients should just all be crushing it, and they should just be signing up clients on every single sales call, and they should get inquiries off the back of every single post. This entitlement, almost like running a business, is incredibly hard. Being a good coach is incredibly hard. It takes experience, it takes further learning, it takes adjusting, refining your process, your ability to communicate. For me, I think it's one of the biggest things that coaches overlook is their ability to communicate their message with their clients. Tonality. How do you get your client pumped on a check-in or on that first call? Like these touch points that you're having with your clients have profound impacts on how they show up for your program. You know, if a client feels excited to open a check-in form from you because they're going to get that Loom video and it's the best part of their week, you're winning. If you're flat, you're dull, you let your external things affect your day and you bring that into your check-in responses, that's going to have a negative impact on your client results. So these are things that are often overlooked, that I try and get the coaches to think about, that ultimately they're just like little 1%, but they compound and make a huge difference to their coaching business.
That's one thing I will always take away, and what I learned from Nick Mitchell. Love him or hate him, and people know my views on him. He taught that every time you go onto the gym floor is a performance. And that has stuck with me so much. And I'll be forever grateful for that one bit of a gold mine that you taught me. Because like, if I've had a bad day or it's midnight, I will still give an energetic check-in. I have to. Because I know that when a client comes into me in one-to-one and their energy's down, I know I feel it. So it's my responsibility to try and make sure that my clients don't get that from me.
Yes. And it's not always possible, but you should 100% be striving for it. You know, we are going to have shit days and you can't show up as your best self, but you have to make a huge conscious effort to make it happen. Like I made a post about it recently, but in particular in a personal training session, and you know this, Simon, dude, like that hour or however long they spend with you is supposed to be the best hour of their week. You know, a lot of people are investing a lot of money into personal training. And if you're coming in and you're half-assed, you look like a bag of shit, you're sweating because you trained before the session, you haven't showered, you're drinking a brew, don't greet them like a dog that hasn't seen its owner all day, then you're doing it wrong. Like it needs to be the best part of their day. And the same is true for online coaching. I want online coaches to treat their check-in responses as though, imagine that you know that the client opening the email is the thing they're looking forward to the most. If you know that, then you act differently when you record the Loom or you write the email, whatever you do. So yeah, I really want trainers to take that into their check-ins.
I think that's something that resonates me a lot about the work that you do in terms of with trainers as well. Maybe this is something that sets you apart that you didn't even think of. But I get that you think that from the way you present yourself. Like the setup you've got with your studio there is polished. Your videos are high production value. There's quality. A lot of the stuff I've seen on your stories are, how do we teach guys? Like no business mentor teaches lighting setups and studio and I've seen you do that. And I think like, for me, I mean, I live in Hong Kong, the flats are the size of a postage stamp, right? But the fact that I've got a light there, the fact that I've got this thing, which I tend to change every single time that I do a call with somebody, but like those tiny little things do matter. And I think I definitely see that with you, that it's about, right, how do I polish this and make sure that when a client invests in you, you don't have that buyer's remorse. Because it's amazing how much I've seen people turn up late to PT sessions with a coffee in hand, and or eating protein bars, doing some curls whilst the client's training. I'm like, what are you doing?
Crazy, but it happens. And then, you know, I speak to trainers obviously a lot on a daily basis, and they're worried that the industry's saturated or there's too many trainers in their gym and they're struggling. Like there's a lot of trainers and there are a shit ton of online coaches at the minute. Every man and his dog seems to be an online coach. That doesn't mean they're all good. And actually being great isn't that difficult to do if you're willing to do the little 1% different things. One of my good mates, Matt, and another business coach, Matt Peacock, shout out Matt, Optimize coach. Yeah. One of his sayings that I regurgitate frequently is, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that's so unbelievably relevant here. You know, if you're checking in with a client and in the background, you've got your dirty knickers on a clothesline and you haven't done your hair and how you show up just isn't 100% the best, those little things, you know, you're not portraying yourself as the high-end premium product that you are trying to sell yourself as.
Yeah.
So how you do anything is how you do everything. Just have that on replay in the back of your mind when you produce content, when you speak to clients, when you create some new product or whatever. I think it's incredibly important.
I took that a lot from Dan Pena, of all people, and Brian Rose from London Real, back before he ran for mayor of London and went all Bitcoin. But in those early days of the podcast, like, he went from the guys in the shorts and the flip-flops, things like this, and then he became three-piece suits. Every episode of the show, the big leather chairs, which I'm very proud to say that I've sat in. And they moved offices. They moved the studio, needed a free event. And I worked in Shoreditch around the corner. So I'm like, well, I'm going to this. So me and my mate went in there and sat in the London Real chair and had a drink with Brian Rose, which is really, really interesting. He used to do like Pilates and yoga outside Pod and Old Street Tube Station, just out on the street.
Wow, what a guy.
He's unique.
He's always doing like his like shadow boxing and stuff outside.
Yeah, he's a unique character for sure. But like, and I'm not saying I'm going to turn up in a three-piece suit to check-ins, but I totally admire that. And it says something about him. You go and you go, this is not going to be a rubbish podcast. Whether you like the content or not, you know the quality is going to be fantastic.
Yes.
100%. Yeah. So going into, like, we talk about PT and stuff, and you mentioned risk earlier in terms of the importance of, if someone took risks, they might be more lucky. Tell me a little bit about your story of starting at Jamie Alston and how it was still in the military, wasn't it, when you actually started there?
Yeah.
That was a big old risk.
That was a huge risk. Yeah, it was a huge risk. So when you leave the military, you have to give a year's notice, and they basically put it in place so that, you know, when you have a shit week on exercise or whatever, and the guys are snapped and they don't want to do it anymore, they don't just sign off and leave. By giving you the process of you have to give a year's notice, it means that, okay, things settle down. You realize, actually, this is quite cushy. I like my mates. I've got a roof over my head, and they don't sign off. So that's why it's in place. It's a process. And I was very fortunate in that I saw the job opportunity pop up with Jay. I applied for it. I started going through the process. Concurrently, Grenade showed interest in me as like an athlete or an ambassador. So it was all like all the stars were aligning, and I was going through and I got to second interviews and all this stuff. I was getting incredibly excited, all the while with this overwhelming fear of, like, actually, if I get given this job opportunity, I may not be able to take it because I have to give a year's notice and they're probably going to want me sooner rather than later. Got all the way through the interviews. They offered me the job. I was going through a divorce at the time, and I just went to my chain of command. And fortunately, at the time I was serving with a really close-knit family regiment called the Household Cavalry Regiment, one of the oldest regiments in the British Army. And I went to my chain of command, and they basically let me go. They just said, look, you've got a great opportunity. You're going through a bit of hardship in your personal life now with the divorce. We're going to let you go. Almost unheard of for that to happen, which was cool. So forever grateful to the guys at Household Cavalry. So yeah, I literally sold everything I had to move to Chichester, sold my motorbike, sold my car, sold all of my electronic gadgets and whatever I had at the time. So I had no money in the bank. Moved to Chichester and had enough money to kind of pay 3 months worth of rent. So I had to kind of make it work in 3 months. The problem that I hadn't really envisaged, because we were sold a bit of a pipe dream, you know, this is the Grenade gym, it's going to be incredible. And it was a cool facility, but it was a new business, and we were new businesses, i.e. personal trainers, inside a new business. We were on an industrial estate, there's no footfall. The marketing was obviously good, so members did start coming in through the doors, but they were few and far between. So for the first year, I struggled like hell. Like, I think people have this perception that because it was the Grenade gym that we were all just crushing it. It just wasn't the case. No footfall, limited members because it was a small facility. So there was only like 80 members at any given point. And it was fucking hard, like really, really hard. But yeah, after a year, just managed to get the ball rolling, built up my online business concurrently. And it kind of progressed from there. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, is what I'll say.
What do you think what do you think that's the fact that you burnt all the bridges is the reason why you were able to succeed and actually get stuff in, because and maybe you were willing to work harder because of that?
Yeah, potentially. I didn't really have a plan B, you know. I was in quite a fortunate position from like a life standpoint, in that I was going through this separation with my then wife. I had no commitments, I had no kids, I had nothing. I'd sold everything. I was just living in this flat in Waterlooville, traveling in to do PT sessions. And like, as an individual, when you've got no commitments and no kids and all the rest of it, it's like, what's the worst case scenario? Like, this doesn't go right, I'll just get a job at McDonald's. I couldn't care less. I really couldn't care less. I was doing butler in the bath on the side. I was like,
me too.
Yeah. There you go. Butler in the bath. So if you're a struggling PT, get your ass out for 60 quid an hour. I promise you'll be fine.
What was your scariest or most exciting hen party that you ever did?
Well, you'll know this, dude. So it's always the older women that are more forthcoming, shall we say, the cougars. Yeah. So yeah, I did have a not elderly woman, but she must have been in sort of like her mid-50s or whatever, take my pinny, like the little apron thing that you wear.
Oh, no.
It's actually a little bit embarrassing because I'm literally walking around a stranger's house stark bollock naked.
You didn't take the thong?
No. So I worked for
such a military man,
the OG butlers in the bath. And they didn't have a thong. You just literally had a pinny, like a little apron that covered your front parts, and everything else was just free as a daisy.
Yeah, I got a banana hammock, but like to the point where it was a G-string. It was like your ass is out.
Yeah, right.
Like I always remember vividly two parties for very different reasons. One was 29 Scousers in a house in the middle of like probably about 20 miles outside of Denbigh in Wales. Like, I'm in the middle of nowhere in a stately home. And I had one person break a prawn cracker on my ass. I had one person bite me on the bum. And I'm like, that was the one I was like, oh, I'm not sure I'm cut out for this for that much longer. But I did one where we turned up and it was like, don't bring up her mum. I'm like, why? Like, you know, it's like, well, she died last week. Okay, good start. It's a good start to the event. And she went, well, can someone pick her up? Like, well, who's willing to go to the train station in the outfit? I'm like, I don't care, but I'm already here with my ass out. What difference does it make going to a local train station? So I picked this girl up, and she's all surprised, all this thing. And on the way back, she starts crying. Like, what has happened? And he goes, her dad was taken to hospital for a heart attack, like earlier that day. And I'm like, I've never felt so underdressed in my life.
Oh,
like, do you want me to leave? She's like, no, stay. I'm like, you sure?
How do you console someone with your dick out? That's just not a good look, is it?
I know. And the company I was with was Buff Naked Butlers, and he was the guy around that was as much as you can imagine, a very professional. I'm sure we're the same with you, where you were butlering, you were playing games, you were having a drink, you were there to work, you weren't there to sit at a party. So I'm sitting there working, playing party games, you know, like pin the cock on the picture. And when I'm sitting next to this hen that's had like the worst week imaginable, I'm like, oh my God.
You get some great stories at Butlers. It is cool. The application process was wild for Butlers in the Bath. Like I had this guy, I vividly remember his name being James, and it was I had an interview with him on Skype. So I'm on this Skype call with this middle-aged man called James, and he's like, okay, Ollie, if you could just take your clothes off and just spin around for me. And I was like, right, I'm praying that this is legit, because I feel like I'm just being funded.
You just see the fake taxi sign in the back.
Yes. So yeah, no, it was all good in the end. He was legit. So yeah.
But I think that's as comical as it is an important story of like so many people come into the PT industry, especially with online coaching now, where you know everyone becomes an online coach, often without really any PT skills, and sees the amount of money they get. And you don't realize that for most people, it's brutally hard. I remember 5 o'clock in the morning, going to Virgin Active, working till 10 p.m., working at Reset outside in the rain, handing out flyers, and then doing the butlering on the weekend. And that's the bit that no one tells you about.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so important certainly my career was.
It is unbelievably important. Yeah, I think people they get a snapshot, don't they? And I need to be more mindful of it as well. And I think other business coaches do. But, you know, our version of social proof is financial wins. That's the biggest outcome that a PT or an online coach will come to a business mentor for, is to grow their business financially, like it or not. You know, I've seen people get butthurt on Instagram about, oh, you shouldn't share Stripe. No, it's the same as you sharing client results. It's the same thing. This is just a different outcome. It's what our clients join us for. So yes, I'm going to share it. But with that as well, there needs to be context, I think. You know, I think that would be useful to add, and just be like, just so you know, this took a really long time to get to, you know, this being a six-figure online coaching business or whatever it might be. Because quite often we just see the tip of the iceberg, don't we? And that can be quite misleading for people.
We see the 3 months to 15K, where you don't see the, like, for every person that's done that, there's a person that's taken 10 years to get to that same level.
Yeah.
But it's the same. It's like someone who got a six pack, whether it took them a year or 6 weeks, it doesn't matter. They've got the six pack at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah.
With like going like into the business, before we delve into it deep, what made you transition off of PT and online coaching when you were doing well with it? What made you become a business coach?
It was the lockdown. And I genuinely, and people say this, don't they? And they weren't, but I was inundated. And by inundated, I mean probably 7 messages, right, of people who, because what I'd always done previously when I was online coaching, I was running a successful online coaching business, multiple 6 figures. And I'd always shown my process on my stories. You know, I'd always be like, client setups, and it looks cool. There was Notion pages and everything's beautifully presented. I sweated the small stuff. I always have.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And coaches always like, they want to know, like, what is that? What software are you using? How are you doing that? Blah, blah, blah. So I'd always get those and I would just ignore them because I owed them nothing, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm not replying to all these messages. But then when the lockdown happened, PTs were messaging me like, Ollie, how do I do this thing online? Like, I've got no clue. And I literally just pulled a Wix website out of my ass, chucked a few videos on there with like some basic systems, like this is how you onboard your clients with automations. This is how you take payments on the phone. This is how you do this, just did the real basics. And when I got messages moving forward, I just said, look, I've made this thing. I'm going to charge for it because I think it's valuable. And it was super low cost to begin with. And I gave them support throughout. And it grew organically from there. And then those clients got results. I helped them with some of their content strategy. I helped them with their sales process. And it just evolved and evolved and evolved. And we took on team members. And it's just organically grown to what it is today. And I think we've got 200 active members or clients. And I think about 600 PTs been through my previous course, which was like a standalone course. So it's done well.
Considering that's the start of lockdown, that's incredible, especially looking at some of the results you've had as well. Like it's good work in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah. So going into this, we spoke about some people taking a while and butting them in the bath and doing all this stuff. If someone wants to avoid that, and they're a coach listening to this now and they want to, we see a lot of talk about DM scripts and marketing strategies and like paid advertising and things like this. Very few people talk about the foundations. In your eyes, what is the foundations of a successful business?
The very root of all of it is client results, is actually doing good work. And it's actually now the reason why we have prerequisite criteria before we bring a coach in. We won't sell somebody into the coaching program if they don't already have 10 or more clients that are currently getting results. That is literally a prerequisite. Their coaching business isn't already making £2,500 to £3,000 per month, because that is often a good indicator that they are delivering a service to a good standard. And we've got this criteria simply because if you're not at that point yet, you just need to keep delivering your coaching and getting results and becoming a better coach. Then we'll help you with sales, marketing, content, automation, systems, process, scaling, so on and so forth. And that's been a game changer for me, is putting those prerequisite criteria in and just not taking people's money for the sake of it. Because my honest advice for anyone who is not already doing 2.5 to 3K is you just need to do more coaching. Just do more coaching, just get better at the job, and then think about developing your business skills.
I love that you say that, because there's a lot of people jumping into business marketing courses, and in a way, I get the idea. It's like, you could be the greatest base PT in the world, but if you have no one in front of you, you're never going to be able to apply it and show it. But I do think people rush into the marketing stuff before they look at, well, can I actually? You can only sell shit once, and they can only actually deliver. You can go to Jordan Shallow, you can go to Luke Lehman, you can go to, I would have said muscle nerds, but muscle mentors, but maybe not anymore. But there's so many people where you can learn your craft from, that people skip over them for the quick buck. And in your position, you could quite easily capitalize on that. And the fact that you don't, going back onto the integrity and your values at the start, is huge.
I'm going to be honest with you, dude. For me, it's just less of a headache. Like, trying to bring somebody up to speed and up to scratch, like, yourself, mate, that what is irreplaceable is experience and actually doing the reps, so to speak. And you can't force that. That just happens with time. Like, all of these great coaches that you look at have been coaches for 5 years plus. So you just kind of need to do the reps. Yeah.
So so you got someone now, they've passed your prerequisite, they've come into the business, to come into Supercharged. Like, one of the things you mentioned is about, you help people create their hero offer, and you help people create their product. And I want to talk about this because when we spoke recently, you changed the way I think about the products I offer. And, is what I offer in my higher ticket offer actually as much value as I think? It's valuable, but is it worth that time investment? And it really made me think about a few things. So in your eyes, what goes into making a truly fantastic high ticket product? How does someone create their niche and their offer?
Yeah, really good question. And the boring answer, and I will add context to this because I'm not going to just give the boring answer. It depends, but it does kind of depend a little bit. Like, and this is why I feel still it's really important that I have that initial coaching period with a new client, really hands-on and one-to-one with myself, because you do have to meet people where they're at. People do have, I've spoken to, like, we had a client in our group called Andy, who did, just by chance, had this amazing opportunity to do like influencer marketing. So he had a close friend who was a huge influencer, who was a plus size model. So she had a captive audience of slightly larger women who want body confidence and to feel great. And so our approach with him was influencer marketing, low cost group model, as many members in. He ended up getting like 150 girls in his group, paying like decent money to be in a group setting. And he was nicking like 15, 20K a month from a Facebook group, right? So that's why you kind of meet people where they're at, and you go, right, what have we got at our disposal, and how do we create an offer that is relevant for your market?
That's rare though, right? Like, for someone to go low ticket, you have to be very well known.
Yes. If you're going to go low ticket, you either need a huge social media following or you need influence of some description. So that's where but that's exactly what one-to-one's about, right? If he was just chucked into a group mentoring as like, here's access to these videos, crack on, here's your offer, then he maybe wouldn't have realized that potential. So it does kind of depend person to person. But the core things that we look at is, who do you want to work with? Like, who's your dream client? What type of people get you fired up to coach? A lot of guys want to work with like bodybuilder-esque clients. So if we start marketing towards Sally, who wants to lose her bingo wings, then that's maybe not going to be fulfilling for that person. So who do you want to work with? Can they afford you? Can you find them? So is it easy to market to these people? Actually, bodybuilders are notoriously difficult to market to. For anyone who's thinking about that, just simply because they've usually got coaches, they usually already invest in their training and their nutrition. But anyway,
you need to be the biggest dude in the room as well. You need to be hypertrophy coach. You need to be Callum Raystrick. And if you're not anywhere near, like, I would struggle because I don't look like Callum Raystrick.
Yes, and it's such a small community that it makes it incredibly difficult to capitalize on it. You can still run a really successful business, and I've got coaches in the group who are bodybuilding coaches who do phenomenally well, but it is a hard nut to crack. But yeah, who do you want to work with? Can you afford them? Can you find them and market to them? And you basically need to create an offer that A, gets them the result, obviously, but B, pays you accordingly. I think that's the thing that coaches massively miss out. A lot of people are either pricing their products based on what their hourly PT rate was or is, or what coaching they've had previously. The amount of coaches I speak to go, oh, I worked with X and they only charge this. So I'm like, I don't fucking care what they charge, dude. This is what you're charging, right? So you just need to forget all of those things. And that's what we do. A lot of the mentorship is mindset. I know that sounds so airy-fairy, but the 6 inches between your ears will have a profound impact on the business that you build. Just your limiting beliefs, what you believe to be true, they will either propel you forwards or hold you back.
You mentioned being paid accordingly. And obviously you create a product that really does like go above and beyond to get these people the results. Like, what strategies have you used for people to add value to their products and their offers without sacrificing all the time and burning them out with no time at all to spend on anything else in life?
One of the really popular things at the minute and things that are working incredibly well are creating a community and coaching the community, you know, in kind of one go, as opposed to speaking to people individually. So having weekly huddles, you might jump on Zooms, you might deliver training to your clients. One of the things that I recommend doing, if you get a question from a client more than once, the same question, create training on it, and it becomes a signposting, you know. So again, when you know that you've got a client coming up who's going on holiday, and they're going to want to keep on top of their fitness whilst on holiday or their training, why don't you create a program that's suitable for most hotel gyms, that most people could do at a hotel gym? Have it there, have a training to talk about what you should do with your nutrition, be mindful, don't eat like a 5-year-old, that sort of thing. You know your client Andy's going on holiday in 2 weeks. On his check-in, oh, Andy, dude, this is the week, blah, blah, blah. Just so you know, I know you're going on holiday in 2 weeks. I want you to watch this training and download this program ready for when you're away. Don't stress about it too much, but it's just a resource there should you want to keep on top of your training when you're abroad. And it's just like a nice value add without taking tons more of your time.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. This is one thing I'm heavily investing in is a membership area, which is early stages, but I'm going to keep chipping away at adding more and making this something that becomes, in a way, a little bit of a calling card, because my big thing for so many years was education. Like when I left, you know, UP, I was known as the guy at Mental Trainers. So I had all these coaches that would never buy from me and follow me, but it was something I knew I was good at. So I was like, right, what could I do here that helps people, you know, who are interested in training to a degree, but maybe don't know where to start, and go, right, how do I get rid of these? Is fasting the thing? Is low carb the thing? What's the best training split? And like, I can create this content. And I've worked with thousands of clients enough to know around about week 4 to 6, motivation tends to drop. You know, how about 8 weeks in, this is when your friends start giving you shit. And it's like, okay, and exactly like you said, create content on it is huge. And I suppose if you compare that with improving the quality of your content, which you spoke about, something that you hold close to you, that I'm assuming that makes your coaches, even in the early stage, that fake it till you make it. I bet all your coaches look the part, and then in turn, if they do a good enough job, become the part.
Yeah, 100%. You nailed it, mate. And also the content creation thing, just to be proactive with what I know some of the friction points people will have with that kind of thing is, I'm already producing social media content. I'm already having to, you know, do my sessions, do my check-ins. I'm a busy dude or dudette. Where the hell am I going to get time to create a training lab? We've created a system where you can literally take half of the content for your clients, dissect it literally in half, and that becomes your social media and email marketing. Yeah. And so like, if you imagine a circle and then making it a pie, so 4 quadrants, in the top right, you have what and why. So what are we learning and why are we learning it? Why is it important? And then in the bottom, on the left 2 quadrants, we have how and now. How do you do it? And what have you got to go and do now to make it work? So the right end of the quadrants becomes your social media and your email marketing, like what are we learning and why are we learning it? And then the left side of the quadrant becomes, this is how you do it, and this is what you've got to do now. And only your clients get that exclusive content. So you can actually kill many birds with just one stone, and you don't have to just like produce content all the time, which is one of the worries that coaches have.
Yeah, I certainly get that. I think for me, it's like I always notice in like I know I can do that, but it's the technical skills of actually putting that into practice, like editing content so I can do that. And like I'm gonna mess it up, and that's where I procrastinate on. So I think that's quite interesting that you cover those things, because I reckon more coaches don't take action on things because they're overwhelmed by stuff more than they actually are lazy or don't actually know how to do it or not willing to do it.
I actually did a post about this recently. It's so common, dude. Like the amount of coaches that I speak to who put things off or procrastinate because the task is quite overwhelming and they're looking at things from a bird's eye view. So we just got a rule that we call the very next thing. And the very next thing is super simple. It's just like, right, so this is the task. It's quite big. It's quite overwhelming. What's the very next thing that I need to do for this task? And that might be come up with the name of the program or the product. That might be the task. And then you just commit 5 minutes, only 5 minutes to doing that one next thing. And what happens is actually when you do that, and you probably would have heard this from, I think it's James Clear's Atomic Habits or someone, a book of similar ilk. When you do that, you create momentum, and actually you find yourself you could just continue. Before you know it, you've chunked out a big bit of work, and something that was overwhelming, you've just smashed out.
That's a really interesting tip. I've heard it before, but it's one of those things you forget about. I'll go away and start to implement more in sort of the way I work with things. So like to start to close off, what is like, you mentioned a couple of them, but I want to go through one more. What's another big thing that you feel that between the 6 inches between your ears that coaches in particular struggle with in terms of becoming profitable in the business or getting results with their clients?
There's a few things, but I think a really, really common one would be building personal brand. I think is massive and will serve you for the rest of your life if you start doing it now. In particular in this kind of social media age. Friction that I often hear is nobody will be interested in what I'm doing. It's boring or whatever. I don't know what to say. It doesn't matter. You know, one of the best bits of marketing advice that I can give trainers who want to use their Instagram stories is show your work. Show your work. That's all you need to do. So like if you're stuck for ideas as to what to put on your stories, just show what you're doing day to day, but make it appealing, make it aesthetically pleasing. And I'm only now doing this with Supercharge, and I'm only in this position because I've been building personal brand on social media through Snapchat and Facebook for the last 6-7 years or whatever, just showing up consistently every single day and just showing my work. So then when I could be a personal trainer, online coach, and I could drum up interest and business promoting that. But when I have a new thing, i.e. Supercharged, because I've built personal brand and I've got trust in my audience, people will happily, buy into that. So the kind of saying that I'll leave you with on that thing is the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. So if you're worried that it's too late or you've missed the boat or whatever, just start today, because in 5-6 years from now, you'll be incredibly grateful that you did.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I always remember it was John Goodman's one from his early book, Ignite the Fire. Do a good job, make sure everyone hears about it. And in that plant the tree analogy, it brings me to this podcast. I wanted to start this podcast like 5 or so years ago. When I was looking to start a podcast, when I got into podcast, it would have been Ben Coomer and me. Now, could you imagine if I'd have done that then? But I think I have a knack for it. I've gotten good feedback from it, both from the listeners and the people have been very grateful, including yourself, to give up their time and have a conversation with me across the world. But it's been so rewarding in so many ways to run this podcast for the last just over a year that I could have easily gone, missed my chance. I was like, but I've started now and I'm better at it. And I'm better at the interviews and I'm better at the production value and I'm better at all those other things because I started. And I couldn't agree with that. Couldn't agree with that sentiment anymore. So I know we're coming to the end of the lot of time we had booked out. So for people who want to know more about you, more about Supercharge, want to hear about your personal brand, how can they find you?
Probably the easiest place to signpost to would be my Instagram, and then you'll find the link tree and you can find my YouTube channel and my podcast and all of the things that I've got for free. My Instagram is Ollie, Ollie, Carson, Carson, and then 2 underscores. And yeah, everything's linked in there. I've got a few free resources for personal trainers and online coaches that you can download in there as well.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch the content you put out is great, and there's as you said, there is generally so much good high quality content, and you will definitely understand what I talked about earlier on with the high production value when you go on your page. Like it looks as professional as the product I'm sure is. So thank you very much for giving me time for me, and I really appreciate it.
Mate, thanks for having me.
Anytime.